This is 860 AM. The Answer.
Sponsored by The Way to My Heart Incorporated.
Welcome to the Heart of Innovation. 60 minutes that could save life and limb, with new breakthrough ideas and innovation changing the healthcare landscape. Brought to you by patient advocacy group thewaytomyheart.org in partnership with Abbott. Here are your hosts for the Heart of Innovation, Emmy Award-winning journalist and founder of The Way to My Heart, Kim McNicholas, and interventional cardiologist and founder of the Save My Piggies Health Education Series, Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. Kevin Morgan is truly a force to be reckoned with as a former veterinarian, P.A.D. author, and just world-class athlete who is persevering despite being dealt DNA that led to aortic disease and peripheral artery disease. Since learning of his AAA and PAD, he has been committed to researching and trying ways to overcome these vascular diseases through strengthening his mind and his body. And during this show, he is going to share his methods that would have helped him to overcome the mental challenges and physical challenges to maintaining his ability to be a world-class athlete. So I'm really excited, Dr. John Phillips, for this story of Kevin Morgan. He has been on before. He shared his actual journey to diagnosis and treatment and perseverance in a previous Save My Piggies episode. But now, since it is Mental Health Awareness Month, we want to talk about his mental fight every day and challenges he faces at 80 plus years old to persevere with these vascular diseases and continue to be that world-class athlete that he has been.
First and foremost, good afternoon and good morning for those of you, I guess, on the West Coast, Miss Kimberly. You had said that you were going to be potentially tackling some pigeons during the show, so that should be interesting. This is a great show topic because it dovetails on what we discussed last week, since we focused on kind of resilience. I love getting into people's minds and understanding how they tick, particularly those that struggle with chronic diseases like peripheral arterial disease. We have mentioned in the past that PAD is kind of like cancer in the sense that it doesn't go away. We are always trying to push it away from, keep it in check. And as soon as you give it an inch, it'll take a mile. And so you have to be resilient. So I'm looking forward to the show. I know you were kind enough to send me 2 of Kevin's books that I've been looking at. Got a lot of interesting content that I want to ask him about. So I'm really excited. I hope we have a good show.
Yeah, the 2 books, you can find them on Amazon. How to Train for Aging. That was one. And also How to Fight the Crippling Pain of Peripheral Artery Disease. And so in both of those books, he does address the mental challenges that he has faced every step of the way. It's interesting because we have a network of patients with peripheral artery disease that are constantly, communicating on a daily basis. And one of the challenges I know that Kevin has faced in posting in the groups all of his milestones is that people say, well, you're not relatable, that you're just on a whole different level than all of us. You can't relate to any of us. And I thought it was really important to bring him on this show today because actually he can relate. And actually it is a fight for him every single day. And he struggles just like with anyone else. And I think it's important for people to know that just, based on what you see out there online isn't necessarily the whole story. And so I think it's important for Kevin to share his whole truth. And I think it'll inspire so many people with peripheral artery disease who can do the same, hopefully through his inspiration.
Two comments. Number one, love the ring on your left hand there. That's pretty stylish. That's
It's
cool.
my mom's. I felt a need, with Mother's Day recently. It's just I've missed my mom a lot this week. And so my dad let me wear her rings. And my grandmother was an opal. So this one was handed down from my grandmother she was an October baby to my mom, and she always treasured it. And so since Mother's Day, I've just really wanted to be close to my mom.
That's a
So she
fantastic,
also lost
fantastic
her life
tribute.
to aortic disease.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
you know,
And then the other comment that I wanted to make was it's fascinating. I don't know if that's the right term, but that people think Kevin isn't relatable. Obviously, he's an elite athlete, but you don't just become an elite athlete overnight. It takes, particularly without just peripheral arterial disease. Our guest last week, what Mike struggled with, and you just have to keep working. And I see it every day in patients that you just have to get that inertia away from them
yeah.
and try to hopefully motivate them somehow. But you have to motivate yourself. You've got to get out of bed every morning. And we've talked about this before. There's two types of pain in life, the pain of regret and the pain of discipline. And I think the pain of regret hurts more than the latter.
Yeah. And some don't realize it because they can't get to that point, right?
Right.
To where
I
they
I
have that.
understand.
But you were mentioning Mike Pulowski, who is a former pro athlete. He was on a Florida pro team. He's also still the voice of the UC Berkeley Bears, the football team. He was a former quarterback for that team. And during last week's show, if you haven't checked it out, he was talking about his struggles with a chronic lung illness that he developed as a child and how he persevered over that. But then, going forward, a lot of people didn't realize he had so much success, on the field, and then his TV career and everything else. But then his life just seemed to fall apart, and he ended up with terrible anxiety that he would still have to put on a happy face in front of people, just outward facing. And he was really struggling inside. And I felt blessed that he shared that with us, but he also talked about how he was able to work through that and create um, additional mental toughness. And that's hopefully also what Kevin is going to be able to share with us, today, that life is a struggle over and over every single moment of every day. There are different struggles that we face. And every single one of these struggles helps us to create the mental toughness. And so we're going to get into meeting Kevin in just a moment. Why don't we take an early break so we can get back as quick as possible and start Kevin's story? And hopefully he'll inspire you as much as he's inspired us. So stay with us.
Leg health can indicate risk.
Fit Old Dog's aging training tip number 1 is never give up. In 2010, I self-diagnosed an aortic aneurysm, and Joe Fulton fitted me with an AAA stent graft. I needed to modify my Ironman training to protect that stent, which I did by reducing hip flexion on the bike and avoiding use of the rowing machine. Fortunately, in 2011, I finished the Lake Placid Ironman with that stent graft. However, it was displaced in 2013 in a bike wreck, and Tara Mastracci of the Cleveland Clinic repaired it. I was very lucky in that respect. However, it wasn't over yet. In 2014, I developed calf pain in marathons, and then real problems began. What a pain. However, no pulse could be detected in my right foot. In 2015, I had an ABI test in Mark Farber's facility, and he confirmed I had P.A.D. However, in 2013, with P.A.D., I managed to be third in my age group in the World Half Ironman Championships in Finland, using Fit Old Dog's training wheel, which begins with the study of awareness. Tip number 1, never give up. You never know what you can do if you try.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Since it's Mental Health Awareness Month, we want to talk to Kevin Morgan, who's overcome so much physically and mentally to become a world-class athlete at 80 plus years old, still suffering from aortic disease and peripheral artery disease. And he has 2 books on Amazon. One is How to Train for Aging, and 2, How to Fight the Crippling Pain of Peripheral Artery Disease, both very inspirational books that offer tangible, actionable ways in which hopefully you can do as he's done, which is to overcome any sort of limitations provided by these types of diseases so you can persevere and live a better quality of life as well. But it's not as easy as it sounds. Kevin Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. We appreciate all you've overcome and the success that you've had. But I know it's still a fight every day. But thank you for being here.
Yes, I think it's I have disadvantages and advantages. My disadvantages were I was born during a war. I had rickets as a kid, so I have fairly weak bones, and also I have a genetic hyperlipidemia, which is what called for P.A.D. Those are the disadvantages. My real advantages, I think, is I enjoy sports and always have, and as a veterinarian, I have medical training, so I can think my way through the solution to challenging problems. For instance, with the AAA, I had a stent graft inserted, and I modified my training to protect my stent. So you really, the trick is you have to be consistent. You have to get all the help you can from doctors and surgeons. But once you leave their facilities, it's really up to you to work out what you can do and what you can do safely. So that's been pretty important. It's helped me with both AAA, for which I modified the way I rode my bike to minimize hip flexion. And with P.A.D, I worked through a series of modifications to improve blood flow to, through, and back from my feet. And you might wonder how I did that. I asked the surgeon if he could do an angioplasty or a stent, and he said it's much too dangerous to do that for my popliteal artery. And so basically, he said I should do 3 30-minute walks a week. Well, that's not really the way I train. I'm still doing half Ironman and attempting full Ironman distance races. So I thought it through. And the first thing I realized was I need to minimize impact so as to prevent the reverse shock wave, preventing blood to my feet. But what turned out to be most useful at the end of the day was, one, spreading my toes with yoga toes and keeping my toes spread wide, because this separates your metatarsal bones and there are blood vessels that run between those bones. So by separating your toes, you spread your feet. Number two, have a wide toe box shoe, whether it's for walking or running. And number three, never wear tube socks. They create lateral compression of your foot, worst possible thing. And then thirdly, learn to use the muscles of your feet. And this you do by flexing your toes. Just imagine picking up a towel with your toes and then using your whole foot. And this will dramatically improve both blood flow through your feet, which I've discovered over the last 8 years. This is why I'm still able to compete. And more importantly, it contracts muscles in your calves, which improves venous return because the veins in your legs, you've got valves. So when you contract the muscles, that helps pump blood back to the heart, reducing resistance for blood flowing out of your feet. Is that clear?
Yeah, and I'm curious, just taking us back to the very beginning, because doctors say that the best way to prevent and stop progression from any sort of vascular disease is exercise, 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 walk, walk, walk. What was that reaction that you had when the doctor said, well, you have these vascular diseases, and yet you're incredibly active? And I'm curious if the doctors had told you, especially when you were diagnosed with PAD, that you needed to just walk, 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 and come back in a few months if you don't feel any sort of symptom relief, as they tell to all these other patients. But we do have a number of people like you that exercise, 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 but because of bad DNA, still end up with peripheral artery disease. So I'm curious, from your perspective, you had to have that, oh my gosh, what the heck type of moment where I have been exercising. How in the world did I end up progressing to this point with blocked arteries?
Actually, Kevin, before you answer that question, can you clarify, did you actually have peripheral arterial disease from blockages, or did you have a popliteal aneurysm? Because aneurysm.
I actually do have, I was recently diagnosed with an aneurysm, popliteal aneurysm, a few weeks ago, but that's never been mentioned before. I got pretty well 100% blockage of my right popliteal. through ABI test and ultrasound. And my right foot is essentially living on collaterals that I've grown through training. It kind of surprised what gets me is the tech, who I think was not a nurse manager. Anyway, she was very surprised at the level of my collaterals, how extensive they were. And yet, when I go to see the surgeon who's seen the report, there's no discussion, no interest. There's zero interest. Like, I do not understand why I'm getting zero interest in what I've done through my medical training to improve blood flow past an almost 100% blockage on the right, and those data are online, and a pretty severe blockage on the left. But this all comes about because of my hypertriglyceridemia that I diagnosed in my lab about when I was in my 30s. At that time, we discovered, because I was doing a lot of hematology, that we need some plasma for some platelet function studies. The tech came back and said, "What have you been eating?" She showed me my plasma. It was like clotted cream. My fasting triglyceride was over 2,000, and my HDL was less than 20. I immediately realized this was a serious, serious problem. I modified my diet. I knew little about the effect of exercise on hypertriglyceridemia at that time. I was talking a long time ago. I saw physicians eventually, and they wanted to put me on statins, which makes no sense. Statins block HMG-CoA reductase, which is the first step of cholesterol biosynthesis. I had a hypertriglyceridemia, not a hypercholesterolemia. I find it very difficult to engage these kinds of physicians in logical debate about biochemistry, exercise. I think they're just busy. I don't think they're bad people. They're just busy as hell. They're busy saving people's lives. Anyway, it wasn't in my early 50s. I managed with diet to get my triglycerides down to around about 500 and my HDL up to around about 30. I undertook Ironman training because my son got me into it. Within 1 year of full Ironman training, which is a lot of exercise, my triglycerides were down below 150 and my HDL was 80. Just exercise. That amount of exercise completely corrected my dyslipidemia. And so, but I knew, remember, we're talking 30 years ago. So I knew with my kind of dyslipidemia, I was going to have problems with vascular occlusion eventually. And now I'm 80 years old and 81 next month. I'm not at all surprised that that the chickens came home to roost on that. And it was 8 years ago I first saw clinical problems. 7 years ago I had the ABI test, which confirmed it. It's still slowly progressing, but I'm actively building collaterals, and I'm actively investigating ways to improve flow by modifying the way I work out. And this business, I would say the thing that's helped me the most is contracting my toes. So what I do is I kind of drag myself along the ground with my feet, which toughens up these muscles it strengthens enormously the muscles in my feet. And that's had a dramatic effect. Spreading the toes has definitely helped. And the other 8 or 9 things are in my book. And all I can say is, if I hadn't done those things, I probably would have lost my toes by now.
And coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we'll hear more of Kevin's inspiring story. So stay with us right here on the Heart of Innovation. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We are talking to Kevin Morgan, and he has written 2 books, How to Train for Aging and How to Fight the Crippling Pain of Peripheral Artery Disease. He's 80 plus years old, and he is still competing as a world-class athlete despite his debilitating vascular diseases. And throughout the show, we are talking about how he's able to do it. But Kevin, I really want to get to that mindset that you have, that when you were diagnosed with both of these, and for most people, they can be crippling. With my mom with aortic disease, it was actually fatal. With so many people with peripheral artery disease, it is a disease that's more prevalent and deadlier than most cancers. And yet here you are, you're still competing at 80 plus years old as a world-class athlete. And you were, even before being diagnosed, you were working out, you were exercising regularly, something that they say is supposed to prevent these types of issues. How frustrated, like, what was going through your mind, in saying, hey, I have been working out, how in the world, should I be having these issues right now when I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do? That had to have crossed your mind, like, should I continue doing this stuff? Is it even worth continuing to exercise?
Well, when the AAA or the aortic aneurysm was really a result of a genetic weakness in my connective tissue, probably not directly related to the dyslipidemia or the blood fat problem. So that didn't worry me. Once I had a stent put in the aorta, I had to think about how to modify my training to stabilize the stent and not dislocate it. So I made some changes based on very logical thinking. I mean, I have a very Aspergery personality. And so I thought it through and modified my behavior to protect my stent. And I've managed to do that ever since. I mean, you don't have a bike wreck because that did dislocate it in 2013 and it was repaired in Cleveland. The biggest problem with the stent is it limits blood flow. It's non-elastic. So it reduces the amount of energy I can put into my legs. So it does slow me down on the bike. But it wasn't enough to prevent me from doing those races. So that was fine. PAD, peripheral arterial disease, is another thing altogether. It's a monster. It's really, really terribly difficult to deal with. You have to face pain, and you have to understand competitive cycling, which is part of my sport, is a lot about pain management. It's intensely painful sport, and you get to know the difference between good pain and bad pain. So I would say when it comes to mental toughness, you have to be mentally fairly tough to do Ironman anyway. But some days it's a bit overwhelming for me because it seems like this endless battle. And when I go out to run, which is the hardest of all, I have to work against the pain, get my collaterals open wide. And I know after about 3 to 4 miles, my collaterals will be wide open and a lot of that pain is gone. And then I'm starting to cruise again, something I never imagined was even possible 6 or 7 years ago. But a lot of that is due to modifying the way I move. That definitely helps. When it comes to mental toughness, yeah, it's tough. We all have different ways of motivating ourselves. For some of us, it's being alive so we see our grandchildren. For me, I love the sport and I enjoy life a great deal. And what I use as a motivator is I sign up for another race. If I sign up for a race, I have training to do, and it keeps me on track. It's very easy to say, well, this hurts too much. I'll just have a beer and chill out and read a book. Well, that's certain death. You move or you die. I think that's the deal. And but I'm fortunate that I love the sport. I just love the cross training. When I go to races, I meet friends at races. And the last 2 races I was in, I missed the cutoff slightly because of my P.A.D. And in Finland, in the World Half Ironman Championships, I came in 1 hour later than the cutoff time. I thought they'd pull my chip. Because they knew I was 80 years old and I had P.A.D., they kept the finish line open for me. And I would say I really managed to finish that run, which was very, very difficult and hairy run, because I wanted that finished photograph. I wanted that finished photograph for the very people you're talking to. They needed to know what you can do with almost completely blocked arteries below your knee. And you can do it by growing collaterals, exercising, making slight changes, spreading your toes. I mean, is that really such a big deal to wear yoga toes a few times a day? I mean, and learn the various things in my book, which you can actually get the ebook for free from my website, or you can buy it to support my work from Amazon. You make these changes and you can keep going, but you have to have determination. It's basically, I mean, I have a friend recently who broke her hip and she was starting to give up. She was in a lot of pain. And I said to her, it's move or die, Sheila. It's move or die. And I think it got her going because basically that's true. And in the case of your patients and people who listen to the program, it's move or lose your toes, move or lose your feet, move or lose your legs, move or lose your life. And yet you don't have to. You don't have to do that. You have to know that you've just got to fight it. It's a battle, and boy, it is worth it. It's so worth the effort. It really is. But is it easy? No. Is it worth it? Yes.
Kevin, earlier in the show, you had mentioned that, I believe, if I heard you correctly, you started running when you were in your 50s, early 50s. So what were you do? Did you always exercise, and or what happened?
I always had a sport. When I was in my
Okay.
I was a teenager, I went to I was a small kid because of rickets, right? So I like to stand up for myself. So first it was I joined a judo class, then I got into water polo, hiking. I went through martial arts for 4 years in my late 40s, and then I watched my son in an Ironman race in my early 50s, and man, I got the bug. And I'd never been a runner ever. And so, in order to finish an Ironman, you got to run a marathon at the end of the race, right? It's part of the a the race is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a full marathon. So, to finish that marathon, you're going to know how to run. It took me 6, 7 years to learn how to run from my early 50s through my early 60s. And then, with some really good coaching, I managed to run Boston, and that gave me the confidence to say to myself when I felt I'm not a runner. Well, I ran Boston, so I am a runner, and that helped a lot. But yeah, no, running, I started in my early 50s.
So what do you say to someone who's listening right now that may be sitting on the couch with their feet up, having a soda and potato chips, and in their mind they say, well, I've never exercised, I don't know what to start doing, I don't know what to do, I can't do it. What would you say to that person if you were sitting next to them?
Get off the couch, eat healthier food, and think about your loved ones and how you would like to be alive for your loved ones. And then start to educate yourself and start just little and often. Learn how to move. You have to build body awareness. People don't really listen to their bodies enough. They put buds in their ears, and they're not. They need to listen to their bodies and see what's going on, and think back to when you were younger. What was it you were good at in terms of body movement? Like maybe you played, I don't know, baseball or basketball or something. All the things you learned back then are still inside you. It's what you call your base. So now you have to reclaim your base of what you had when you were younger. That doesn't mean go out and do what you did when you were young. You'll injure yourself. I strongly recommend first step, go to a good PT and get an assessment, and they will tell you where your strengths and weaknesses are. For instance, I did that when I knew I was going to take on a full Ironman race. I knew I had to get a health assessment, see if I could do it. I went to a PT. It turned out I have very weak leg, adductors, the muscles that pull your legs in. So that was added to my exercise routine. I found coaches. Sometimes I couldn't afford a coach, so I go online and watch videos. So find what you love to do. You have to enjoy whatever it is you choose to do, but it has to give you both cardiovascular strength and somatic strength, muscle strength, and mental strength. And I would say the mental strength is 80% of the problem. That book I wrote on how to train for aging, the ultimate endurance sport, I allocated the first half of the book to trying to give people the mental strength they need to fight back against entropy or decay, which is what this is exactly what you're doing. You're fighting entropy by using the force of life itself. People forget that they're alive because of life force. Nobody really knows what that is, but they know what its effects are.
And coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to find out exactly what it is and some of those tips and tricks to building that mental toughness that's in the first part of his book, How to Train for Aging. That's next right here on the Heart of Innovation. So stay with us.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's a great day to be alive. We're having a fantastic conversation with Kevin Morgan, veterinarian scientist, and I believe 6-time Ironman finisher. And so before we went to break, Kevin, you had mentioned, and you've mentioned this in your book, the topics of entropy and syntropy. And I am reading a quote from your book. You say entropy and syntropy exist in a state of balance, with entropy working to kill life and life playing to defy entropy. You are life, you kick entropy in the butt using syntropy. Explain that to us, please.
Yes, the concept of syntropy I liked as a metaphor for life, and nobody knows what life force really is, but we do know the effects of it. How are all these apparently unalive molecules that we're made of able to create what is life itself, and our emotions and our feelings, and the way we fight back against the heat death predicted by physicists, because entropy within a system always increases, and so energy is lost as heat. And the physicists would have you think we're all doomed and that's the end of it. And then I came across the concept of syntropy, which is basically based upon the full energy equation. Not there's E equals mc squared, but it turns out that's not the complete equation, which I think I put in the book. And if you correct for the square root of the complete function, you end up with a theoretical negative time, which means time traveling backwards in time. Backwards movement of time has also been predicted by Feynman diagrams in particle physics. Quantum mechanics and chaos theory tell us that we don't really understand anything about the universe really. We kind of understand it, and we have metaphors we use. And so I got very interested in a couple of books on syntropy, which seemed to be a pretty good metaphor for life force. So I felt if my readers realize that inside of them is a will to live, a will to fight back, there's also this tendency to give up because of the inevitable entropy that tears us down and will eventually cause us to die. Well, life fights against that. And I like the syntropy concept, and it's worth reading those books. It goes counter to what many physicists think, but I'm not that impressed by certain physicists. That's a whole nother story.
I also think, Kevin, it's because they haven't experienced what you've experienced. So a lot of times you can have all of the theories in the world and look at the numbers and things like that, but until you actually experience it and live it, I think that that's a whole other level, don't you think?
Yes, exactly. I know I'm fighting against entropy and my body's slowly decaying, but I'll be damned if I'll give up. And so I see I have this life force inside of me that I wanted to get people to understand. Everyone, even the guy sitting on the couch drinking a beer and eating chips, he has that life force inside of him. He needs to grab it and use it and fight back. And that's really what I was trying to get across.
And what's interesting is that as we have a live studio audience, I think that those have joined us quite a number of times on the radio know that we do have a live studio audience. And I've been watching Thomas, who is in the UK, and he and I have had conversations of late. I wanted to see if Thomas could jump in because, he's been struggling over there in getting care. And just as we were talking and halfway through this broadcast and through your inspiring words, he was just showing us that he has actually gotten up and he is either walking in place, Thomas, or you're on a treadmill. I couldn't quite tell because you have a background up.
I'm walking in place. I'm looking at treadmills online, and I think they might be within my price range. So I think I'm going to invest in a treadmill because where I live in the UK, it rains 70% of the year. So going out is a bit of a challenge sometimes.
Where do you live in the UK?
I live on the southeast coast in Kent.
Yeah, I'm from Bristol, but I've been in the States a long time.
It sounds like you've been there a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Thomas, any questions for Kevin or anything that you want to say in response to some of his inspiring words that you've heard so far during this broadcast?
I'm not great for coming up with questions on the spot, but you're in luck. Kevin was talking about spreading toes and having wide toe boxes in shoes. And I wondered if he was referring to these toe separators.
Yeah, yoga toes I use, but there are various forms. Yeah, that's what I use. My toes wide.
I purchased these having seen your last broadcast where you were talking about walking with your toes, which I've
Yeah.
been trying to do, but because my diagnosis is, well, it's fairly recent. It's just in the last couple of months. So the truth is, I'm still coming to terms with it. And so when I put the toe separators on, I've put them on for a while, but I'm kind of afraid to leave them on because, well, I, 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 because I'm new to it, and it came as such a shock to me that, and how, I mean, I've had claudication, I now realize, in my right calf for a couple of years, never able to explain why it was so painful to walk after a while. But when I realized I had a serious problem was when I would wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly I wouldn't be able to feel my right leg. I'd be able to feel it with my hands, but my leg itself could feel nothing. And the further you go down the leg, the more numb it came. I couldn't feel my foot, couldn't feel my toes. So that happened once, and I turned out of bed, and as typical, the inline flow returned, so everything was normal, and I had no idea what that was about. I didn't I didn't associate the cramps that I was getting when walking with not being able to feel my leg and feet or toes at night. Um, Kim was talking about how I've had difficulty accessing care in the UK. When I did go to my primary care practitioners, I didn't actually get to see a doctor, more a doctor's assistant, who took my symptoms to the doctor, and then I was sent back a leaflet. So, with some bitterness, I say that I was diagnosed remotely, and I was given a leaflet, and I'd
Thomas,
never heard of. Sorry,
sorry, Thomas.
it's the Kevin show.
Yeah, no. This is the beauty of, having a live show, because you touched on two things that I think are really important, and this is why it's so important that we do whatever we can to support the work that Kim does, meaning educate and raise awareness. Because if you had chest pain, you would know that that's a heart attack, potentially a heart attack, and that's life threatening, and you need to do something. The problem with peripheral arterial disease is it's patients don't know enough about it. We don't do enough education, and you don't necessarily know what you're feeling or your symptoms and what's that from, and could it be life threatening? Now, people with peripheral arterial disease, you don't die from peripheral arterial disease, you die from the blockages elsewhere. And that's why we have to be very aggressive in reducing risk and things of that nature. But it just, we have to create that link. There's a gap between the symptoms and the knowledge, and whatever. And Kim and her work does just that to try to bridge that gap. That's really important. And number two, your diagnosis, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I've heard this story before. A lot of times physicians, clinicians, through no fault of their own, misdiagnose patients with P.A.D. for something musculoskeletal or nerve or things of that nature. And it's just so important to continue to do this work. And I just applaud. I'm gushing a little bit here, but I applaud Kim for what she does and the fact that she's able to connect with you. And it's just amazing.
And I absolutely love that, Kevin and I have talked quite a bit, and he's wondering, well, the books aren't flying off the shelves. I don't understand why. I want to get the word out there, not to make money, but literally because the information has helped him, and he's sharing his heart. He's sharing what's worked for him for other people, and he wants to see other people thrive as he has. And coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, I want to hear his reaction to Thomas saying, hey, you know what? You had an impact on me. Look at this. I bought those toe separators and I'm ready to go. I want to hear more. So stay with us for more from Kevin right here on the Heart of Innovation. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the Heart of Innovation. For more on today's topic, go to theheartofinnovation.org. That's theheartofinnovation.org. Once again, here's Emmy Award-winning journalist Kim McNicholas and interventional cardiologist Dr. John Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Time clearly flies when you're having fun. Kevin, Before you respond to what how you motivated Thomas, I'm going to use a quote that you took from Bruce Lee in your book. Are you going to let the obstacles in your life be stumbling blocks or stepping stones? So Thomas was just diagnosed with a potential stumbling block, but after hearing about your story, now he's going to use it as a stepping stone. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, Thomas is lucky he knows what he has. I mean, this is the bottom line. It sounds like he certainly has PAD. It'd be ideal if he could get an ABI, ankle brachial index test done to be sure, if he can get that done, but his symptoms certainly are consistent with PAD. His real goal now should be to grow those collaterals because, as I said, my right foot is running almost entirely on collaterals. When it comes to my books, you can buy them on Amazon and elsewhere. However, if you go to my website, inspirationalselfhelpbooks.com, and scroll down to on the page Keep Your Feet, you'll find you can download ebooks for free, but the paperbacks I can't afford to print and mail. And so that's available. But the beauty of it is, Thomas, you know what you have and you're taking it on. And there's about 10 or 12 different approaches that I incorporate in that book, all of which can be done without any guidance from a physician. I mean, running with your whole body, you can learn from a book, moving, which you can apply to walking, etc. So the beauty of it is if you educate yourself, you can do really well. I've been at this over 8 years now. I still got my toes. I was third in the World Half Ironman Championships in Finland in the fall of 23, even with really severe PAD and my right foot running on collaterals. So was it easy? No. But then I was third in the World Half Ironman Championship, showing what can be done. So I would say, Thomas, you are very lucky to know what you're dealing with. And I think it's great that you're taking it on.
How scary is it though, to be as active as you are and to know that if you do slow down, that these vascular diseases may overtake you. I mean, anything can happen, injuries. My dad he was 4 miles a day and then he broke his hip. And then it seemed like this domino effect of just one thing after another. He's in the wheelchair, then his back is having problems, then he has heavy legs, and then he ends up with blood clots, and he's really lost his motivation. And so it is something that has to go through your mind. How do you overcome that?
Well,
30 seconds.
Honest, my attitude is fear is a waste of time. It's fear is useful to get you moving and get you going, but there's always a way you can go. There's always something you can do. And I have inspiration in the forms, for instance, Jean-Dominique Bauby's book, The Butterfly in the Diving Bell. If I feel down, I look at what he overcame, far more difficult than what I'm dealing with. So look for inspiration, look for heroes.
Thank you so much.
Heroes.
Kevin, we appreciate you so much. If you want to check out his books, of course, go to his website. You can also pick up his books, How to Train for Aging and How to Fight the Crippling Pain, Peripheral Artery Disease, on Amazon. Hope you were inspired as much as I have been and John has been with Kevin and his story. I hope you have a great weekend, everyone, and tune in every weekend right here on The Heart of Innovation.
Thanks, Kim.